China has vowed to protect the interests of its firms after President Donald Trump banned U.S. investments in companies linked to the Chinese military. Mr. Trump claims that Beijing is increasingly exploiting U.S. capital to finance the development and modernization of its military.
And Simon Marks joins us live from Washington, D.C. for more on this story. Simon, why is Mr. Trump making this move now?
Well, I think it's an indication of a couple of things, Steve. I mean, first of all, he is still president of the United States, and he is consistently following, he would argue, a policy towards China and to those companies that do business with entities tied to the Chinese Communist Party and to the People's Liberation Army. He's following through on the threats that he has made to continue ratcheting up the pressure on both ends of that particular equation. So the White House would argue that this is entirely consistent with what the president has been doing with regard to bilateral relations between the US and China for many, many months now. But there's also no question that with the clock now ticking on the Trump presidency, 68 days left here before President Trump leaves office, I think we're going to be seeing all sorts of activity between now and January the 20th, when Joe Biden is sworn in as president, not just with regard to US policy towards China, but in a whole array of different areas, because the president and his supporters will want to get as much done as possible in a bid to cement his legacy. And one of the key aspects of his legacy, they argue, is this new, much tougher stance towards China and towards business dealings between the US and Beijing.
Simon, is Jill, how far apart are Trump and Biden on this particular area of foreign policy, China? What is Biden's China strategy?
I think we're going to find that out in detail starting at around 12:30 p.m. here on January the 20th. I mean, the reality is that the Trump team has spent the last year creating a new reality in U.S. policy with China. As Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has described it, the country is literally turning a page and putting behind it an era in which engagement was seen as a fundamental principle in that policy with Beijing, and instead, he argues, adopting a much more realistic approach to the difficulties that are inherent in the relationship. Now, Joe Biden, to some extent, will be inheriting a fait accompli. There will be many issues that he won't, at this point, really be able to undo in the bilateral relationship, because so many of them have been enshrined in stone by President Trump and Mike Pompeo and others in the US government. If Joe Biden had the desire to pursue a more positive and less punitive relationship towards China, he can, of course, bring that about. But there's been very little indication on the part of his policy advisors that that's the road that he is going to take. The fact that China now is recognizing Joe Biden as the president-elect is, again, another turning of the page, indicative of the fact that Beijing realizes now and accepts what's coming, but how they go about recalibrating their relationship with a United States that has changed the dialogue of the debate, and that's influenced the Biden campaign. That's going to be the story of 2021.
Simon Marks in Washington, D.C., thank you for that.